The man who is, according to the latest Quinnipiac poll, if the race were to be held today against him and Lieutenant Governor Guadagno, he would win by 16 points. So he could be the next governor of the state of New Jersey. And with that, we welcome Phil Murphy. Phil, good morning.
Hey,
welcome.
John.
Welcome.
Good morning, John. How are you?
Good. How's it feel to be 16 points ahead?
I'll tell you something. We're not taking one vote for granted. I feel someone said to me the other day, Murphy, you look like you're in fifth place. And my answer was, I'm happy to hear that. That's how I want to look. We're scrapping this thing one vote at a time, not taking one thing for granted.
Well, I'm sure you took a page out of Hillary Clinton's book. Look what happened there, huh? I mean,
yeah. Listen, that's a lesson that's one of the more painful lessons we'll ever learn electorally, and absolutely right. I thought that was going to go a different direction. We're not going to repeat that movie in New Jersey.
Right. Okay, let's start with back in October. I first was made known of your candidacy with something that you said, and I believe you were in Atlantic City when you said that. You said you would end the takeover of Atlantic City. Is that still your position? And if so, how would you end it?
It is, John. And it's not as though Atlantic City doesn't have its challenges. It's got an anomalous per capita budget that's unlike any other community in the state. It's got challenges, so it needs a partner in the governor. It needs someone to work alongside them. But the notion of a takeover, I just find offensive, to be frank with you. It's not to say there isn't work that needs to be done. I get that, but this is a partnership that has to work, not something coming in over the top like this was done. So I would end it by not in substance going away, being there as a resource and helping the community. I'm there all the time, by the way. I was there earlier this week. But it needs to be done together. I don't like this big footing coming in over the top.
Well, it seems like it's always been adversarial with this administration in Trenton. And my question to you would be, okay, you want to work together. Do you have any specific plans as to how you can solve? I mean, you're a Wall Street guy. You're a financial guy. So with that being said, what are your plans to fix it?
Well, I think in the short run, what I don't like, listen, I'm a big believer in collective bargaining. I'm a big believer in consenting adults working out agreements together. So that's not something that I would go near, and I fear in takeovers that's where folks look to. So that's one thing I wouldn't be doing. I would work with the community for a long-term reimagining of the community. It feels finally like there's a little bit of stability, a little bit of momentum. We saw a plan the other day for Hard Rock to come in and buy with others the Taj,
right,
and redevelop that and get that back on its feet. That to me is a very good step. That hotel was in the wrong hands. I actually walked the picket line with Unite Here with Local 54 last summer. There's a chance now for that to get into better hands. That's a good sign. But reimagining the community, taking advantage of its God-given assets, its location, and making it work for everybody. I think that's the key. It's worked for some over the years, but it hasn't worked for all. And it's a community. It's one of the iconic communities in this state. It's one of the iconic American communities. So I think it needs that long-term, a better vision, reimagining, taking better and complete advantage of its location would be at the top of that list.
If you just tuned in, Phil Murphy is with us. He is the Democratic candidate for governor, and the latest Quinnipiac poll has Mr. Murphy ahead of his supposed opponent, which would be Lieutenant Governor Guadagno. He's ahead of her by 16 points. Many are saying he's the next governor of the state of New Jersey, and we're happy to have him with us here on Talk with a Purpose, here on WPG Talk Radio 104.1. I mentioned earlier, everybody knows your background is a successful Wall Street banker. I'm going to go to the comparison with a previous governor. I'm sure you've heard this. And when I first heard of your background, I went, okay, I hope we don't have another one of those. I mean, you understand it's a logical comparison. Talk about that. I know you've been getting that a lot. Can you address that issue of we had a Wall Street guy, governor, now we're going to have another one, supposedly, hopefully for you. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, I get it. I don't get it a lot, but I do get it. One answer at the personal level is I asked back, well, A-Rod and Jeter were both Yankees, weren't they?
Yes.
So just because we wore a similar jersey, I want people to judge me on who I am,
right?
In my own biography and my own leadership potential and skills. Indeed, I worked in financial services, and by the way, John, I think there are some skills that I learned over years there that are relevant. How jobs are created. I've worked around the world. I've seen good models and bad. We desperately need to grow our economy and make it fair again. I know how to deal with rating agencies, which is a big dilemma we have. We've been downgraded 10 consecutive times under Governor Christie. So those are skills I think I could bring to the table. But just as it's true that I was a banker, it's also true that I grew up in a family where my dad didn't get out of high school. My mom did. We were so without money, I slept in the same bedroom as they slept till I was 9. I worked illegally as a dishwasher at the age of 13. I loaned money, borrowed money to get myself through college that I paid off into my 30s. I'm on the board of the NAACP nationally. I chaired the board of a women's shelter in Monmouth County where my wife Tammy and I and our 4 children live. I say all that only to make the point that I'd like everybody not just to pick out one chapter in my life. I'd like to present and I'd like to have them read the whole book of my life.
So with that comparison of A-Rod and Jeter, you're Jeter, I'm assuming.
Listen, someone said that to me, and I said, "Listen, they're both probably going to the Hall of Fame." I'm a huge Jeter fan, I have to say.
Okay,
I'll admit that.
Well, so am I. So am I, and I'm a Phillies fan, but I'm a Jeter fan. So so we cross lines there, but that's
exactly.
Good. Okay,
exactly.
I wanted to really focus in, because you talked about New Jersey, and you mentioned it. I was going to get to this, but we'll get to it now. The 10 credit downgrades and your financial background, and not to compare you to the guy in the White House now, he's on another party, but you have a background of that type. So what are you going to do? I mean, this is, I hate to say it, you know it probably, it's a mess in New Jersey.
It is a mess.
Where are you going to start, and how are you going to fix the economy, not only the credit downgrades, but the pension fund and the transportation fund, and we could go on and on. Talk about that.
Yeah. And John, and by the way, ground zero in many of our challenges is in Atlantic County.
Right.
Atlantic County is leads the nation among any county in any state in home foreclosures right now, and we're just not doing enough about it. The government, the state government, can do a lot more and put policies in place that gets at that, and we're not doing it. So that's another data point. You're absolutely right. This state is an economic crisis. I say all the time, if you don't get the economy right, you don't get New Jersey right. That means both growing it and making it fair again. We stopped growing many years ago. We've barely grown under Governor Christie, and we have become a lot less fair. And those aren't mutually exclusive. So if you become fairer, with things like minimum wage and equal pay and college affordability plans, you also contribute. You have a lot more people contributing more fully to the economy.
Phil,
I'd like to see us.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
On the growth side, I'd like to see us reignite some of the engines that we used to rely on. We used to be the nation's #1 innovation economy. We were Silicon Valley before there was a Silicon Valley. There's no reason we can't reignite that economy, or our infrastructure economy. Again, like Atlantic City, taking complete unabashed advantage of our God-given location that, frankly, 49 other states would die to swap in for. So those are a couple of the growth engines. We can't just make it fair and not grow it. We can't grow it and leave aside the fairness agenda. We have to do both. And I think with the right leadership, we can. And if we do it, we get a lot closer to getting back on our feet than we may think right now.
Okay, Phil, can we take a call? Are you okay with that?
100%.
Okay. Craig in Northfield. Craig, good morning. You're on with Phil Murphy.
Well, good morning, John, and thank you for having Mr. Murphy on. And I've been listening. And boy, he is aggressive, and you can't not like that part. But Mr. Murphy, I got a question for you about, and probably the biggest thing for us people here in Atlantic County is the school tax on our property tax. And I'd just like to finish my question, make a statement. We know that we have to pay our municipal employees, and I know that you are absolutely for that. one of the things that we see is that we're paying all this pension, and we watch it leave our state because even they, with an $80,000 pension, cannot afford to continue to pay the property tax because of the school tax, and they leave it. And they leave us. And Mr. Murphy, being a financial guy, I know you can't afford to leave that money, leave this state. So what would you do about that?
So, Craig, very good question. It's an issue I hear not just in Atlantic County, all over the state. So the first thing, and you know this because it's embedded in your question, the education piece of everyone's property tax is a big chunk. So we have a school funding formula, the only one that our Supreme Court has ever blessed, back I think in 2008, that's been underfunded in the Christie administration by over $8 billion. So the first thing is let's find the money to fund the school funding formula, which would immediately get at this pressure. Secondly, we have to grow the economy. I mentioned a minute ago, we don't have enough degrees of freedom right now. We have no latitude financially in our economy. If we become, and particularly our middle class, becomes more prosperous and more secure, there's a lot more money to go around to deal with the challenges that we have. Thirdly, we do a poor job, and in fact the governor's budget is going to cut this even further. We do a poor job of cushioning the blow, particularly for our retirees and the folks who have lost their job. And that's something we got to get better at. We used to be a lot better at that. We've gotten a lot less good at it. And I'd say lastly, probably not so much in school districts, but in other services, I think there's a real opportunity to combine services across communities. And I think that maybe not immediately, but over time, that can lead to real savings. And that's something we also are talking about and want to pursue.
Okay, Craig.
Thanks for the question, sir.
Real quick, Craig. Real quick.
Okay. Well, with the school funding and how you have it in Camden, Newark, they're getting $25,000 a student. Here in Northfield, we're getting like maybe 12 to fund a kid. So the disparity there for us as a middle class person who has to buy an education for my kids, I really don't like it. And I feel that my kid's at a disadvantage by not having an equal amount of money that a student in Camden or Newark would have. Could you respond to that, sir? Thank you.
Listen, I would say, again, I repeat the following. If we had the school funding formula fully funded, we wouldn't be having the same disparity or conversation. But secondly, the formula that our Supreme Court blessed was unique in the country. And that must be said. New Jersey used to be a place that people would look to and say, let's figure out what New Jersey's doing. Typically a role model state. And the reason why it was a unique formula, it was because it looked and built from the bottom up, and it asked a lot of important questions about the type of children that were in your district, whatever the district might be. Do they have one or two parents or no parents? Is English their first or second language? Are they on free or reduced lunch as a measure of poverty? Do they have special needs? A whole series of questions which built from the bottom up. It acknowledged that not every kid is born into the same lucky circumstances that other kids are. And so that element of it, I think, is particularly laudable, and that's an element that I'd like to get back to. Again, I appreciate the question and obviously the frustration that's behind it.
Craig, thanks a lot for the call. Real quick, Phil, before we get to our next caller, the governor's plan called for flat funding in every district. Now, that never came to pass. What's your plan going to be? Are you going to fund across the board the same amount, or how are you going to handle that?
No, you can't do that because, as I say, kids are just born in wildly different circumstances.
Right.
His so-called fairness formula, I used to say before he actually, I guess he's now abandoned it based on his budget speech, but I used to say is neither a fair nor a formula. That's just not the way any educator from any walk of life would tell you that not every kid is born with the same set of luck as other kids are. So you've got to take that into account. And again, I go back, let's dust that formula off that actually was blessed, that is, in fact, in my judgment, fair, and let's apply that across the state. I think everybody would be in a lot better place than they are today.
Phil Murphy is with us. Phil is the Democratic candidate for governor, and according to the latest polls, He is the front runner, and we've talked about that. We will continue to talk about that. We welcome him here on Talk with a Purpose, Saturdays 9 till noon, here on WPG Talk Radio 104.1. Let's talk to Albert in Corbin City. Albert, you're on with candidate Phil Murphy. Hello, Albert.
How you doing today?
Good. What's your question for candidate Murphy?
I got a couple questions. Why is it in our state that it costs $20,000 per mile to do a road project, and in the other states $10,000 for the administrative cost? And why is it in this state here that we have the highest property tax for students, but yet our education system is so poor? There's a much bigger questions than just your funding problem. The problem is that we have a union that strangleholds us. You go to other states. You go to the state of Florida. It costs a third of what it costs us in this state. Why can't we model it like other states that do that? And then on top of it, what kills us is this the taxes that we have to pay because of the prevailing rate. I mean, in my little town of Corbin City, we wanted to build a playground with volunteer money, volunteer thing. We couldn't do that because it wasn't the prevailing rate. This is ridiculous. And this is the kind of stuff that's in this state, in the bureaucracy, that until we deal with some of these problems, you're never going to get taxes down.
Okay, Albert, let candidate Murphy answer the question. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, Albert. Listen, Albert, for your passion and I completely understand your frustration. This is what happens in an economy like the one we have that's not growing and is unfair. And to put a point on that, last year the United States of America had its best year ever in household income going up, and New Jersey finished 50 out of 50. So that's the state that we live in. That's the reality. So anything that costs money, anything you feel like, I'm not getting my money's worth, people get mad as heck, and they get really frustrated. I don't see it the same. Having said that, I don't see it the same way you do, Albert. I'd say with respect. First of all, we've got one of the top public school systems in the country, if not the top. And Florida doesn't. So it could well be you get what you pay for in Florida. I don't know Florida's school system that well, to be honest with you. I do know ours. We have one of the premier school systems in the country. Now, we have too much dispersion of experience across communities, that's for sure. So I can't speak to any given community, but I think we have outstanding teachers and we have outstanding public schools. I just think they need to. It's not all. You made a fair point. It's not all about money. I totally agree with that. But boy, I'll tell you, if we funded the formula that we should be funding with the same amount of money we gave out in tax incentives to keep big companies or attract them, which I think, you want to have a fair tax deal. I get that. But, boy, I don't know that you want to back the truck up like the way we have done it. So I see it differently there. And, by the way, I see it differently in the prevailing wage as well. I think that allows folks in this state who get that wage to more fully participate in the economy. And it factors in things like exceptional training, exceptional apprenticeship programs. I hate to disagree, but I think it's the right thing to do. But, again, I don't blame your frustration because we're all painted into a corner right now by this governor and by this economy, and we're all screaming out, saying, "Wait a minute, this is not right." But I wouldn't take it out of wages. I actually think that's one of our weapons to get the economy back on its feet. And again, I'm proud of our public schools. I want to put more money in them.
All right, Talk with a Purpose here, WPG Talk Radio 104.1 every Saturday 9 till noon. I'm John DeMasi. Pleased to have with us Phil Murphy, Democratic candidate for governor, and according to the latest polls, he most likely will be the next governor of the state of New Jersey. I'm not trying to jinx you.
To God's ears.
I'm not trying to jinx you on that. I'm just going by what the polls say.
Boy, I'll tell you, we're strapping it one vote at a time, as I mentioned earlier.
That's right. All right, we have you till 10:30, right? Is that what we have you till?
Absolutely.
Okay, because we got 3 callers, so let's try to get them in real quick before we let you go.
No worries.
Let's start with Bob. Bob has a question for you. Bob, good morning. You're on Talk with a Purpose with candidate Phil Murphy.
Good morning, guys. Hey, so you mentioned about funding the school formula, and we have the Abbott districts, right? 31 districts get 56% of all the funding, right? That's 5% of the districts getting 56% of the funding. And an example in Egg Harbor Township, we get about $5,500 per student, while just in adjacent town, Pleasantville, they get $16,000 per student. Yeah. Now, you made the point about differences in kids and their circumstances, and I get that, but it really seems like it's out of whack. And would you do anything about that question? Yeah. And then with fully funding the formula, which is great, where's the money going to come from?
Yeah. So, Bob, there are two good questions, and I know your community, and I was in Pleasantville, your neighbor, on Monday night for a town hall, and so the old way of doing school funding in the state was funding by the districts, and you had the so-called Abbott districts, as you mentioned. What I would do about it is I would go back to the formula that we've never funded, which doesn't throw money. It isn't any longer a world where the money follows the district. It's a formula where the money follows the child. And that's the key point. So if the dynamics in a given community have changed over time, as I'm sure they have in your community, the formula would reflect that. Now, it probably needs to be updated, admittedly. It was blessed in the year 2008. And we need to probably tweak it and get it current. But for the most part, that's where I'd start. And then you get away from funding districts and you get toward a formula that funds the reality of the actual students in your school district. And that, to me, is a much more accurate reflection. Where would you get the money? You have to find it from a number of places. We only have so much money in the state, right? I mentioned a minute ago that we have put out tax incentives to the tune, and I think they're a blunt instrument, frankly, and they don't necessarily always get the job done. But we put out tax incentives, not quite, but close to the amount of money that we've underfunded the school funding formula. So that's something I'd look long and hard at as a first pass, because that's a lot of money. I think we should be much smarter about how we incent companies to come here or stay here. And by the way, we do, to give you an example, we do almost nothing with small businesses, and small businesses added together employ the bulk of the folks who get employed in the state and the private sector. So that's a quick first place that I'd look.
Okay, let's go to Carl in EHT. Carl, good morning. You're on with candidate Phil Murphy here on Talk with a Purpose.
Yes, Mr. Murphy. Your party is the party of. That's for your party. You are for yourselves. You are not for what's best for Atlantic County, the state of New Jersey, or our country. Your party needs to look at things differently. And when I say that, you have to do what's best for our country, not for illegals, not for transgenders, not for any of them things. And what do you do for the small businesses? All you do is tax them higher taxes and fees. That's what your party does. I hear all the time from Vince Mazzio. He has a small business, and yet he taxes his business more. It makes no sense. Whatever you want to reply to, you can. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Carl, I don't see it the way you do, so I would say that respectfully. I believe there's enormous opportunity with our small business community. I've come up with an idea called a public bank, where the citizens would own a bank, and one of the main objectives of that bank would be take money from the Wall Street banks and put it into working with community banks, put it in the small business community, because small businesses invariably, when you ask them why are you still small or why did your business fail, it's because we didn't have capital. And as it relates to standing up for the rights of transgender and illegals, I proudly do so. Thank you.
All right, one more call, Phil, if you don't mind. Gina in EHT. Gina, hi, you're on with candidate Phil Murphy.
Hi, good morning, candidate Murphy.
Hello, Gina. Good morning.
Good morning. Speaking to you, I've been listening to you about funding our schools fully, and, certainly I'd like to understand how you would do that when our state is billions and billions of dollars in debt, many, many more billions of unfunded liabilities, and in fact, it was put on the ballot this past November that the state is now able to bond another $12 billion. There's only so much money, as you said, to go around.
Yep.
So I'd like to understand where you would find this money.
Yep. So, Gina, you make a very fair point. We are boxed in. It's very frustrating for you. It is for me. It is for all of us. We've been poorly led. There's no other way to put it. The economy is flat as a pancake, and it's an unfair economy to boot. So you have to look at the $35 billion budget of the state and ask yourself, what are our priorities? And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think we have to ask ourselves, is our priority tax breaks for big corporations? And by the way, I'm not anti-corporation. I want companies here. I want them happy. I want them employing our fellow citizens. That's all a good thing. But there are ways to do that, and there are ways not to do it. And I think we've wasted money. And I think that's a major source. And you ask yourself priorities. Is that what we're for, or are we for educating our kids? I'm on the kids' side. And I believe that's where we should start. And then you have to figure out, will it be easy? No. Is it painless? No. But there are places you can look. And again, I'm looking at tax incentives that have not been effective as one potential source. But I think at the end of the day, if our government doesn't have the right priorities, if it doesn't put our kids at the top of the list, if it doesn't put the folks who need government the most at the top of the list, then who are we as a government? Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Gina. Phil, one more question from me. You were in favor of the North Jersey casinos. What's your position now?
I still am, but I've said that in Atlantic County and in Atlantic City. And I've said the following. Because the developers were willing to cut a very attractive financial deal for Atlantic City. And my fear is if we don't have gaming in the north, we'll have it on the west side of Manhattan. And the developer who develops that casino won't give Atlantic City one red cent. And so I saw a very attractive revenue stream, which each of the principals of those two projects were willing to cut over a double-digit year life into Atlantic City. That's pretty attractive. We won't get that from New York City. We would get it from a New Jersey source. Having said that, that was defeated soundly. I don't know if it's going to come back or not. But at the moment, it's a moot point.
Well, Phil Murphy, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. I already talked to Derek, and I said we would like to have you back on, and we'll schedule that in the near future.
John, I love being on this, and I would do that whenever it makes sense for you.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your time. Good luck. Phil Murphy, Democratic candidate for governor. We appreciate him coming on here on the show. And as we said, he is, according to the latest polls, he is ahead of Lieutenant Governor Guadagno by 16 points. So we'll see. It should be a very interesting primary season. Primary is June the 6th, and we will do our best to have as many candidates as we can here on the program.